The Wall Street Journal overlooks the confirmation of the viability of the Tesla semi-truck. We also take a look at who's going to manufacture the batteries in China for Tesla. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks once again for joining us. If this is your first time on our channel, welcome. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome back. Also want to thank our subscribers and Patreon supporters. Your assist is greatly appreciated. So we wanted to start our show today. We have an ongoing sort of battle/dialogue with some folks regarding who's actually going to produce the batteries for the Tesla China factory. The current answer to that is that the batteries are being shipped from Reno, Nevada. The cells are being made by Panasonic. They're being handed to Tesla, which is making the battery packs, and those battery packs are being shipped to China. So that's the current situation. Once the factory is actually done for batteries in China, we will then have know what the decision of Tesla is. Now, we wanted to point out that there's a number of news reports that have stated that those batteries are coming from LG, or on other occasions, it's CATL, which is a Chinese manufacturer, LG being from Korea. There's another piece of information, which is the folks from Panasonic have said that they will not join the efforts to produce batteries in that factory. And if Tesla wants batteries for their Model 3 from Panasonic, they can simply order more and they'll just ship them from Reno to meet the needs of those Model 3s. So I decided to sort of start with this issue because we seem to be getting very angry folks writing us notes on a regular basis regarding the fact that our facts are wrong and that we need to get with the fact that, yes, the batteries are coming from whichever manufacturer it might be. Guess what? The current situation is that the batteries are being made by Panasonic. The current situation is there can't be any batteries made in the China factory because there's no production facility for batteries. Now, what Elon has said is that batteries will come from California, Japan, and from local suppliers in China. So we wanted to propose that there are three possibilities. Number one, by the time this battery is ready to be built, Tesla has purchased enough companies and enough talent that they can actually build the initial cell themselves in China. Very real possibility, sourcing most of those materials locally and reducing costs in the process, especially because they don't have to pay an outside entity. So that's one possibility that they have not talked about doing, but they've been recruiting personnel for that to be the possibility. The second option is for them to actually get LG to make those batteries. Very good possibility that that might be the case. The challenge with the LG situation is that China has pretty much given Tesla a free factory within which to build. They've also made every effort to include things like subsidies and all these other things to actually make that factory really go. So the reason they're doing is to grow the number of jobs in China. So the LG possibility is a very good likelihood, and the reason is because LG builds a good battery and they could build spec to what Tesla might want. So that's an extremely good possibility and one that's been foisted by many people thus far. Our analysis of that is that it's possible that LG wins the account. We actually think that the likely supplier in this case, will actually be CATL, which is a battery manufacturer based in China. It won't be LG because LG is a competitor when you build cars as well. But we think that it's possible CATL ends up winning the contract for a bunch of reasons that we just sort of went through. Number one, it's a Chinese-based company. Number two, they can source most of the materials in China, therefore keeping the jobs and the revenue in China for the Chinese. Number three, the the deal they'll get from CATL will be better than anybody else because the Chinese government deliberately wants to keep those jobs. And then number 4, another good reason why it ends up being CATL is that everything that is learned by CATL in the process of building those batteries can be transferred to other manufacturers in China that are China supportive, if you will. So we bring all this up because, look, if you want our channel to get on board of whatever you've heard from other news organizations, we're just not going to do it. Once it's announced officially by the company, that's when we'll actually agree with it. But currently, having LG go in and do it makes sense, but it doesn't fit the mold of what the Chinese want to see happen. And so the other note on this finally is that one of the things that happened is that initially Elon Musk said, yeah, we're going to build the batteries in China at our local factory. That's why it's called the Gigafactory 3. He then came back and said, we've changed our mind. We're actually going to just grow the volume of batteries produced at the Gigafactory to address our needs in China. So we'll just ship the batteries over there. So he did say that. So now they're actually building this facility to build batteries, and something's going to happen in there, just not now. So the bottom line on this is, if you want to have your comment deleted, put another one in there on the attack regarding who's going to produce the batteries there, because frankly, what we're interested in is sharing what the truth is and what good information is. And just because there are news organizations that hate Tesla, they occasionally say a good thing and mostly say negative things show up. You know, none of those organizations ever say we're absolutely wrong on this, this, and this. They always are like, forget about what we got wrong previously. Let us move forward and introduce new wrong information that we want to disseminate. So unfortunately, we're a small channel, so we actually have to deliver information that's high quality, that makes sense. And if you're a really big channel or you're a big news organization with a big reputation, you can throw a bunch of junk out there because it doesn't matter, because everyone will forget what you said and move on to this new situation. So the answer is Panasonic is building the batteries right now, and it's in Tesla's best interest to maintain Panasonic as the person that's producing for a whole bunch of reasons, like everything is calibrated to those batteries right now. So you actually have to figure out what the new batteries are and set up your software to drive those new batteries, whoever they come from. So in our mind, it's a lot cheaper just to throw those on a boat, have it show up in China, and throw those in the car than it is to figure out what you're going to do in terms of a new supplier, including Tesla being its own supplier. So we will see what the answer to this is, but that's our statement on it. And every time I get these negative comments about, get my story or facts straight about China, I'm going to actually say the same thing, which is the facts are that Panasonic's building the battery, and it hasn't changed and won't change until that plant is done. So the next thing we wanted to move on to, speaking of organizations that always get it wrong, is that we have a commitment for every 2 weeks. By the way, our backup video today is that of the Reno Gigafactory, where Panasonic consumes 65% of the space to build the battery cells that we're talking about. So what I wanted to highlight here is there's a university called Carnegie Mellon University, and it's probably one of the top 10 engineering universities in the world. So there's a professor in the mechanical engineering department that has a focus on energy consumption. So one of the interesting things that happened is after Elon Musk announced in April, I believe, of 2017, that there's a truck coming, he actually published some research. And what the research looked at was that in the case of semi-trucks, he presented all of these well thought out numbers that articulated the fact that an electric semi would not work, and that Elon Musk was full of it, basically. So then what happened is the Wall Street Journal read this paper and then featured this article for all of its viewers to enjoy and confirm that Elon Musk was nuts. What then happened is the semi-truck was introduced, and many of the world's largest corporations like Pepsi and UPS, et cetera, started putting in initial orders for that vehicle after having engineers ride those trucks and determine their viability for several months prior. So what then happened is that the Wall Street Journal did not follow up to articulate the fact that the vehicle had been carefully vetted and was actually viable. So what we found interesting is that we've noticed that particularly Rupert Murdoch-owned entities, being the Wall Street Journal or Barron's or Fox News, all these organizations in general have large dollar commitments to big oil companies, et cetera. And they have a process going where if it's negative news about Tesla, it gets the headlines. If it's positive news about Tesla, it gets buried or forgotten. So the title of the show that we chose today was the fact that at Carnegie Mellon, they actually did another study after they'd had time to review the capabilities of the Tesla Semi. And what they determined was that there is the case now for electric semis. So I wanted to reference you, and we'll include a link to this, to the fact that they're articulating the fact that, yes, electric semis are now viable and achievable, if you will. So I want to take my hats off to both the grad student and the Professor Vinaswathan, I believe. It's probably pronounced wrong. But the fact that they use scientific principles and they came back and reviewed their conclusions and made sure that they put good information out there, I think is great. There are a few points that we wanted to cover from the research that they articulated. Number one, they highlighted the fact that the Semi is as it's iterated by Tesla, is in fact viable. The key number to watch is 38,000 pounds. So their argument is that Semi has to be able to haul approximately 38,000 pounds in order to make it economically viable to put freight in that vehicle. Number two, they indicated that 20 cents per gigawatt hour or lower is the range at which electricity has to cost. And clearly that needs to be some kind of a rapid charge facility so those vehicles don't have to sit for long periods of time. So, we could go on in details, and your questions will prompt us to respond, post-show on other elements of what's going on with the Semi. But what we were fascinated by is if you look through all the elements of the paper, we thought the paper was a little bit short-sighted, actually. And the reason is that the case sample that's given is 500 miles of range with 500 trucks. And how would that fleet work in that circumstance? And we found this interesting because what Elon Musk specifically focused on is the fact that at 250 miles or lower on a daily basis, that represents 70% of the truck market. So we thought this was interesting because a use case, as an example, might be Walmart. Walmart has these service centers, and those centers have the inventory, and that truck will go to a number of stores to replenish that store each day and then go back. So that route for a Walmart truck, it could be 250 miles, but it's sub in that 1 to 200 mile range is about right in general for how they set up their warehousing. So the use case that Carnegie Mellon is highlighting is really focused on this 500 mile range. And for some reason, they chose a range at which your battery size is going to be such that you start having problems making the numbers work because the size of battery starts to consume large amounts of the freight space for that vehicle. So if we concentrate solely on the use case that Elon talked about, there's this phenomenon going on where, guess what? It works. And the confirmation it works is the number of orders from those who've had an opportunity to test the vehicle out and look at its application within their distribution systems. There are also certain specific customers who are eager to get the Semi who have an even better use case. In fact, we think that for certain entities like the Port of Los Angeles and Port of Long Beach, we could actually see special Teslas with even smaller battery packs than originally thought. And the reason is this: the warehousing, so Port of Los Angeles is the largest port in the United States in terms of moving freight. If you add the Port of Long Beach, which is right next door, it's pretty much perhaps the largest freight movement facility anywhere in the world. What's interesting about this is that they have huge issues with pollution from the thousands of vehicles that move that freight. And so so the intrigue here is that all of that freight and all the pollution that's coming out of it is really affecting places like Los Angeles that the ICE manufacturers have made sure don't have adequate transportation that's not cars. So in order to address this, you have an intense focus by the greater Los Angeles area, I'll call it, where, for example, they're paying $500,000 a truck right now to have prototype trucks on the road that do not pollute as they move freight from those ships to warehousing inland. The distance is anywhere from 30 to 75 miles inland, but you have to add traffic in as that freight is being moved. So in theory, a 200-mile range truck or even a 150-mile range truck for very specific warehousing is not out of line with what Tesla would be able to deliver. And what's nice is that when you drop battery pack down to 150 mile in range, you now increase the amount of freight you can carry. And in essence, there's even more of a use case for actually use of the Semi. So we wanted to highlight in general this phenomenon because it's just fascinating to us that, number one, you have the Wall Street Journal unwilling to step back in and articulate when they were wrong. And number two, you have a situation where the truck is actually viable, and we think it's 6 or 7 months away from arrival, even though we're currently in December of 2019. That's a summer arrival for the early units of this truck in 2020. And we think it's going to be awesome. So we're actually looking forward to a lot of negative news relative to the Tesla Semi. And it'll be interesting to see sort of what the reaction is to those that are taking delivery and how intense the pressure will be to actually get copies of it in large numbers. We also believe, Elon pointed out, when the vehicle was initially announced and then potential customers drove it, Elon indicated that there's unlimited demand. And one of the things that we're forecasting or seeing happen is as the large companies start putting these trucks into operation, we're going to see a situation where it's possible that if their experience is a good one, they may start paying even more to push Tesla's activities with other new vehicles like the Roadster or even the Cybertruck back, because there's such a groundswell of demand for that vehicle, and there's a limited amount of supply of batteries that would be able to go into that vehicle as those trucks are being built. So we'll keep you posted on what we see on this, but we did wanted to note that there's a key sort of study that's come out from Carnegie Mellon making the case for electric semis, and we think this is terrific. The one fly in the ointment that we see in terms of the analysis that was provided was that there's a huge discussion they have about, is the electricity being able to be done at a high speed? Tesla's already announced the mega charger, number one. Number two, is that electricity going to come in at a price point that allows Tesla to validate, if you will, its use case. And there's an application regarding this electricity that we think is fascinating, and it relates to, I want to call it transference. So Walmart is one of the largest buyers of electricity anywhere in the world. What's available right now, once that truck becomes available and it's consuming large amounts of electricity, is they have a number of, if you will, offsets that they can do when you're a big company like that others can't. Number one, they can put solar panels on top of distribution centers, and they already have Tesla solar panels on top of their stores in many cases. And they could literally have a charging facility there where if it takes a truck a half hour to offload, that truck could at the same time be onloading electricity produced on top of that store. The second opportunity that a place like Walmart has that's an offset is the fact that, for example, if you look, there's a giant solar production plant right outside Las Vegas, just inside California. That facility is a large-scale utility facility, but one in theory, a Walmart, for example, could optimize the location of their power generation in that fashion by putting it right next to that facility in Nevada, but the electricity produced there would be sold or loaded up onto the local Southern California utility, but that utility would then give Walmart credits for electricity use throughout the state of California. So this is an interesting offset that big companies can do. So one of the options that lurks is to have the effective cost of electricity hitting those trucks head towards zero, and meaning that if they do the CapEx cost to put up a solar facility, there's a certain cost to that electricity, and that electricity cost could head towards zero as you amortize the equipment there over time, but it's still producing. So this is very different than buying fuel for those trucks, because there is no way for them to offset those fuel costs in a similar manner by making an investment in solar panels on the roof or solar panels on the ground. So one could easily see a situation where one of the ground-based solar panel methods is to take those large parking lots and put little solar panel coverings on a lot of car spaces, and now you even generate more electricity that can either be sold back onto the grid or pumped into the trucks that are going to be making the deliveries to restock. So there's a lot of real interesting use cases that are coming forward for these trucks going forward, and we very much look forward to seeing them implemented, and definitely think it's a viable circumstance. So as usual, we're in our 20-minute zone now. Happy to take questions. I noticed that a number of you said hello. Gamiel, obviously Jerry, Donovan, thanks for doing so. We're really focused on making sure the content is delivered before we actually get into questions or comments for those who are not there. Exactly. Jerry is pointing out that one of the options is to the Gates from Deutschland. Yeah, Jerry was pointing out there's a swappable battery option where Tesla could swap battery packs out and switch from charged to uncharged. I think that's possible. Yeah, the trucks could definitely do that because it's only 15 minutes. But based on how long it takes to move product into the store, someplace between 50 and 30 minutes, I think it's actually possible that you could put a supercharger at the store and charge up the delivery truck, for that 15 to 20 minutes, and keep doing that at the stores. And now the vehicle can make it back without any issues. So this also brings up the use case relative to the fact that whenever there's a discussion of how far the vehicle has to go, it's assumed that the 250 or 500 miles has to be continuous. In the case of large distribution entities, in this case, we're looking at the folks at Walmart, that truck actually has to stop. And there are a lot of smaller and larger entities that are in a similar position where they're restocking stores. And when that vehicle's at the store, there's an opportunity to do recharging, and it's just a matter of running the numbers on how and when that might work. So, I think the battery swap idea is a good one. My only concern there would be you now have to assign mechanics there to make sure everything happens properly, whereas all you'd have to do is plug it in and use electricity generated at the store overnight to power up that vehicle, so it can both go on to its other deliveries or make it back to its the start point for distribution easily. Any rate, I want to thank all of you for taking time out to join us. Join us today. Jerry just made the comment that people need jobs. I just want to point out to you, Jerry, one of the problems with having non-dedicated people that aren't paid a lot is I just had an oil change done at Walmart. The folks that did it didn't tighten up the filter, and therefore half the oil in the engine was leaked out and it damaged my engine. And so now they're saying, oh, you probably screwed up in it some way, but the sensor didn't show up. So the point is that it can often be better to have the best people working on specific tasks, because very poorly trained and very, very poorly paid people can actually do work that does more damage than good. So stick on your point of swapping out batteries, Jerry. Stick on your point, Jerry, there on that. But I'm not going to change my position. I just think that dedicated mechanics are a good idea. Great question. Why am I using fossil at this point? Steve, you assume that we all have the cash to go get our Teslas. So I have one on order. My plan is to be in a Tesla in 2020, and we're making every move to make that happen. But it takes a few more Patreon supporters and show likes and subscribes to get over the economic hunt. But a Model 3 Performance is what we will have or get done by December of next year. And thank you for asking. And thank you for your support. Any rate, again, wanted to thank all of you for taking time out to join us. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. In German, we say Tschüss, macht's gut. Well done on the LG Model 3 Friday, Karsten. In Germany, we say Wie geht's, wie steht's noch aus zwei Beinen. In French, we say Au revoir, lehitraot. In Hebrew, we say Choda Hafez. In Swedish, with Brother Donovan, we say Hedge Do. Ni hao ma, Chinese, Zdravstvuyte, Russian. Thanks once again for joining us. In Jamaica, we say No respect, walk good man. Have a great day, and thanks for joining us. And we look forward to your comments post-show.